Friday, 4:15 p.m. The Gumleys and the Sharkos are the last neighbours to invite. They're also the hardest to ask. It's always easier to deal with things when they're further away. When I was going out with Virginia, I remember getting caught in the floods at Nyngan in western New South Wales. The phone calls Virginia and I had while I was in Nyngan were sensational. Long rivers of truth. If only her mum had not objected to me ringing reverse charges. A week ago, it would have been easy to knock on the Gumleys' door and simply ask them to my 21st. Now it's scary because of what I know. Nevertheless, I've set myself this task of knowing everything about them, so for my credibility, I need them to attend. I should ask the Sharkos, but they're tough going without Niles, so I might give them the miss. They can eavesdrop if they want. I want Niles to come. His birthday is the same day as mine, and that adds a certain novelty to the occasion, but I could live without his parents attending. Mrs. Sharko teaches piano. Mr. Sharko is an academic who's never been able to get academic work because his qualifications aren't recognised here. Niles maintains they're Russian, but Sharko doesn't sound Russian. One thing for certain, they're the most overprotective parents in the world. They put the hose on children who ventured too close to the house. As a consequence, Niles became a prize target at school. I've never seen a boy with more texture cock and balls on his school bag than Niles. Teenagers prey on frailty, and since Niles' parents were so intent on protecting him, everyone became suspicious of him. If he needs so much protection, there must be something wrong. I was the first person, perhaps the only person, ever allowed to get close to Niles. Niles begged me to lie about my heritage so we could become friends. His parents tended to be more sympathetic to folk of Eastern European descent, so I said I was half Yugoslav, and after that they let me socialise with their little prince. The only complication was that occasionally Mr. Sharko talked to my mother in broken Slav, but that was the only time our little plan looked a bit shaky. The enduring image I have of the Sharkos is them pottering about in the front yard, shaping their cypress pines to resemble various ancestors. Mrs. Sharko in a broad-brimmed sun hat to protect her blotchy skin, Mr. Sharko in a small white terry toweling hat that made him look stupid. In retrospect, their weirdness is probably something as simple as them having trouble with our language. However, as I said earlier, Pleasant Avenue and its surrounds are not tolerant of unfamiliarity. This is a street where people like to know the outcome before they try something new. For instance, Niles was the first person to bring a tin of sardines and a separate loaf of bread to school for lunch. He paid for that error over and over again. If you want to fit in at school, you only bring pre-cut sandwiches and you never ever put sardines on them. You still hear the plonking of an imperfectly played piano as Mrs. Sharko tutors another adolescent in the wonders of music, and Mr. Sharko still potters about the garden on weekends, but since Niles left home, their spirit is broken. They no longer keep the temple in such pristine condition because their prince is no longer in residence. He took off in a brand new Ford after his 18th birthday. In some ways, our shared birthday makes Niles and I like brothers, but like many brothers, we're different. I responded positively to the toxic emotions found in overprotection, but in Niles it only built up hostility, which resulted in him leaving home the moment he had a car powerful enough to climb the mountains surrounding our city. You saw it coming. Whenever Niles was allowed out, usually on Thursday nights when the shops stayed open late, he'd cram months of missed social opportunities into a few hours of freedom. That made him a very dangerous teenager. 4:45 p.m. Mr. Price has me under surveillance. As I make my way home, he's standing at the gate with his crudely wrapped parcel of blackfish. I can smell his need to talk to me. Sometimes you can smell desperation, and sometimes it doesn't smell that nice either. In this case, it smells like fish. Sadly, I can't break this need to please people, and against my better judgment, I cross the road to talk to the sinewy pensioner. Being disliked has to be my biggest fear. "Blackfish?" he says, thrusting his wet piece of newspaper at me like a fencing foil. He must have wrapped these in a hurry. Normally, his blackfish are precisely wrapped. This package is barely hanging together, and it's wet. It's as though he saw me coming and quickly improvised something. "I told your mum I can come to the party," he says. That's funny. I haven't invited you, I think to myself. There's a temptation to ask how he found out, but you don't ask a chef for a recipe, a magician how he did a particular trick, nor do you ask eavesdroppers how they get their information. Maybe information has metal specks woven in it, and Mr. Price attracts it with a huge magnet he hides inside his house. Mr. Price saying to me, "I told your mum I can come to your party," is as close as he'll ever come to asking a direct question. Asking a question puts him in a position of less power. Mr. Price doesn't like to admit he doesn't know something. By inviting himself, he's trying to stay on higher ground. What he's really saying is, "I know about your party, even though nobody told me about it." The hastily wrapped blackfish is his desperate attempt to retain his position as the keeper of the grapevine. 5 p.m. No RSVPs for the party. The only definite so far are Auntie Coral, Nev, Mr. Price, and my parents. Top night. I desperately want this party to be memorable so I can say, "Hey, remember my 21st, where I dragged Ken up and down the hallway with his pants down, and him screaming out, 'I'm a cowboy, I'm a cowboy, let's go to Melbourne.'" Images like that stay with people forever and ever and ever.